Review and Scrutiny Committee, Wednesday the 3rd of March. Coming from a living room or a dining room somewhere near you. So the very first thing on the agenda is apologies for absence. Nicola?
Hello, Chair. If I could run through the attendance list, and as I get to everybody's name, if they could indicate that they're present, and obviously I'll indicate for the ones that have given me their apologies. So to start at the beginning, Councillor Reid.
Here.
Councillor Gallagher.
Here.
Councillor Armstrong has given her apologies. Councillor Carty.
Here.
Councillor Dunbar has given her apologies. Councillor Dunn.
Present.
Councillor Gibson.
Present.
Councillor Heppel has given his apologies. Councillor Horncastle.
Present.
And Councillor Stowe.
Here.
Thank you, Chair.
Excellent, thank you so much. The next thing is item 2, the minutes of the meeting on the 13th of January 2021. Is there agree I sign them? I can see everybody nodding, so that's fine. And can I just ask Nicola at this point, you did send me the previous ones to actually sign. So do I just put them in an envelope and send them back to you at County Hall?
Yes, please, Chair.
Right, excellent, I shall do that.
Thank you.
There's the disclosure of members' interests of things that you haven't already disclosed in previous asks. Brian?
Yeah, just as a point of clarity, later on in the documents we're going to be talking about partnerships and town councils. It's just a thing where I would mention that I am on a town council and I have been involved with partnerships.
I think that's perfectly all right to say that. I will also say I'm on Blythe Town Council, but I've not been party to any discussion about the partnerships. I don't know if any of the other town councils want to mention anything. Doesn't Ken Stow does?
Can I just say I'm on product partnership?
Yep, you certainly can. Excellent. Okay, so the next thing is the forward plan of cabinet decisions. If I can find them. I would rely on Sean to tell me about this if he's able to. Is he gone? Okay, it looks as though he's decided.
Chair, Sean just dropped off the meeting. I'm sure he'll be back in a moment.
Well, obviously, does anyone have anything to say about Appendix A? It doesn't look as though you do. No. Either when Sean reappears, we'll ask him if there's anything we need to note on it. Okay, then it's B, which is a cabinet report we're being asked to pre-scrutinise. Northumberland's sports facility strategy and Northumberland playing pitch strategy 2019 to 2031. So who's going to deal with this?
I'm myself, Chair, Nigel Walsh.
Oh, there you are, Nigel. Yeah, okay. If you want to do this, that'll be great.
I do apologies, Chair, and members of the committee. I'm having a bit of trouble with video, so I'm just going to keep it on audio if that's okay. I'll endeavour to join you again visually again soon. So thank you, Chair. This covering report is confirming to members the completion of both the sports facility strategy 19 to 31 and playing pitch strategy 19 to 31. Both strategies are classed as adopted evidence, therefore not a statutory plan and instrument in itself, i.e. part of the development plan. We, NCC, adopt these documents for our own purposes and it will constitute evidence for other uses, including planning. And as we discussed previously, typical use would be in the negotiation around Section 106 agreements. So in terms of recommendations, Cabinet next week will be recommended to note the completion of the Northumberland Indoor Sports Facilities Strategy and Northumberland Playing Pitch Strategy in accordance with the agreed study brief. Note the vision and aims of the strategies. Note the priority investment needs from the research. Agree the principles for future provision of both indoor and outdoor sports facilities across the county. note the recommendations and action plans underpinning delivery of the strategies, and lastly, to agree that the strategies provide an evidence base to support the implementation of the Northumberland Local Plan and other development documents as a material consideration for the determination of relevant planning applications, and provide an evidence base for use by other council services. I'll quickly just go through a couple of key issues, Chair. It begins with the underlying rationale for why we as a council invest in sport and recreation, principally because of the positive direct effects of physical activity, and also because of the contribution to communities in terms of building community cohesion and identity. There's a clear national planning policy framework, NPPF, that sets out the requirements of local authorities to establish and provide adequate and proper, is the key phrase, leisure facilities to meet local needs. So I've gone on to say assessment should identify specific needs and quantitative or qualitative deficits or surpluses of open space, sports and recreation facilities. So basically, Chair, this is looking at the rationale for why we provide and where we provide it. Okay, and where we do, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll quickly just have 2 minutes on each of the strategies, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, indoor facility strategy. The key elements addressed by the indoor sports facility strategy include quantity, quality, accessibility and availability. In terms of scope, it includes indoor sports halls, swimming, health and fitness, squash, indoor bowls, tennis and athletics. In terms of structure, it follows a nationally recognised format, which is guided and enforced through Sport England. I've included the vision there, Chair, for this particular strategy, which, if they could note, the strategy says, as a minimum, NCC wishes to see accessible community sports and leisure facilities, places and spaces for swimming, fitness and sports hall activities, sports available for all residents. This ambition includes both formal and informal spaces, e.g. community halls, in which to play sport and be physically active. There's a number of aims within the document, which I'm not intended to go through, and also the principles are accessible as well within the main strategy. It identifies priority investment needs, and very positively, we can see that we are working through those investment needs with the investment we're seeing into Blythe, Morpeth, Berwick and Ponteland. Section 7 has a suite of recommendations which members will have had a chance to have a look at. I feel generally it's a very positive picture, Chair, for a county as sparsely populated, in fact, the most sparsely populated county in England. The strategy and the external consultants reported that, in particularly thinking of that to our most popular facilities, that the existing swimming facilities, which are community accessible, have catchment areas which cover most areas of the county. They are well located, which is positive. Similarly, on sports halls, in terms of access to pay and play sports halls, strategic sports halls, that's the free badminton courts plus. The report says the majority of residents in Northumberland have access to a strategic size sports hall, which offers pay and play access within a 20-mile drive time. It does note there is some exceptions because of the rurality of the county in the west of the north and the west of the west. That can be expected and will be a very similar picture in places such as parts of Durham or similarly parts of rural Yorkshire. So generally we're well provided for in terms of indoor sports facilities. I'll quickly just have 2 minutes on the playing pitch strategy. Again, this is a second strategic assessment that works inextricably with the indoor facilities strategy. It's an analysis of supply and demand again, of playing pitches, both grass and artificial, across the county through a detailed needs assessment. Again, this methodology is specified by Sport England, which we followed obviously very closely, and a consistent process is followed by local authorities across the country. This strategy and research was carried out working very closely with the national governing bodies, NGBs of sport, who all have their own facility development plans, and all sat on the steering group for this and did sign off the evidence that we collected. Sports specifically included are football, rugby union, cricket, hockey, tennis, bowls, athletics. And where possible, we've recognised all forms of play. Like I said, it's been overseen by a steering group with representation from the NGBs, regular representation from Sport England, who received and verified the data. The steering group chair will continue to operate to ensure that the strategy remains up to date and relevant. So though it is a lengthy strategy in terms of its coverage scope up to 10 years, there will be regular steering group meetings which will inform and ensure that the evidence base is maintained and contemporary. Okay, again, there's a set of recommendations in 5.2, generally for the council and per individual sport, which go into a great deal of detail. So thank you, Chair.
Excellent, Nigel. Thank you very much. Did anyone want to raise anything with Nigel? Eileen?
Bringing this in, Jeff, but I don't know if it's appropriate to this paper, but I would like it noted so that the Cabinet could look at this at some time. It's to do with fenced-in play areas such as tennis courts and football fields that are gated and fenced in. What it is, there's lots of issues at the moment with people taking dogs on the tennis courts and things like that, letting them exercise. I would really like it if Northumberland County Council could look at having a policy adopted within the council to make this practice not legal, you know, to stop people going into these fenced-in areas and using them as their playground for the dogs to run around. I know it doesn't address, it's not part of this thing, but I want it brought ahead, moved forward a bit, because I keep asking about it, not getting anywhere.
Okay, well, I'm sure it is illegal, but I don't know whether Nigel just wants to... Oh, there you are. We'll see you now, Nigel. Welcome.
You know, I'm quite shy, Chair, really. You know that, Jeff. Councillor Carty, yeah, just in response to that, I assume that the areas you're talking to will be the areas that are not attached to or associated with a building or a pavilion. These are the ones that are more open access. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. It's just I've tried to get this brought in support of a couple of cabinet members before, but not really had any feedback or.
Yeah, these, I mean, multi-use games areas will be covered within the scope of this in terms of future provision, but and the detail of that in terms of the type of use or improper use won't be covered in terms of the accessibility issues, but that's certainly something we can look at, Councillor Carty, on that. I mean, the ones that are managed sites, essentially, we do lock those to keep out that type of issues. And I'm quite surprised that people want to exercise dogs in a tennis court area or hard surface.
They do it in Ridley Park, and I have no end of issues, especially when people want to play tennis and dogs have been there, and it's not really very nice. And I have tried to bring it up, and Ridley Park's a fenced-in area, and that it's just, I think that we could have a policy on it. Mm-hmm. In that policy, if people are breaking that policy, then they should get fined for doing something that it shouldn't be doing, really. Do you know what I mean? It's just a grey area, and obviously I'm not a policy maker or anything, but I think it's something that could be looked at, and it could go right across Northumberland, really.
Okay.
It needs addressing.
Yeah, thanks for that, Eileen. I think Nigel has noted that, and I'm sure that it'll be fed into the system somewhere. Was there anything else?
Chair.
Ryan?
Thank you, Chair. Nigel, just a couple of searching questions. Mm-hmm. The recommendations that are put there, the 6 recommendations on page 1. One, as a point of clarity, well, as a point of information for myself, will you be coming back and giving annual updates of how the strategy moves forward? And 2, I note that there's 6 points there, and 4 of them are noted, 2 of them are agreed. Is that something that would be agreed by Cabinet, or are you looking for agreement by this committee?
My understanding, Councillor Gallagher, is that we are looking for agreement from Cabinet next week on these. However, obviously comments and recommendations are noted from this committee, which Sean will advise on that. But in terms of the specifics, what I would say, Councillor Gallagher, is in terms of where we're asked to note an element of it, I would say that's where it could be subject to change, because there could be changes in society, population changes, etc. What we're actually asking to agree, there's 2 elements, are the principles that we will apply as a council to any future development, which will be our overarching principles of which will assess the need for development. And the agreed strategies, essentially, There's been some pre-discussion around that to recognise them as an evidence base. So we would be seeking to essentially the adoption or the agreement of these strategies for council usage.
Thank you very much. Chair, just one further question on page 3.
Yeah, of course.
It's got in there investment and provision, but support the voluntary sector. How do you, is there any improvement, or is it just same, you know, trying to support the voluntary sector in the way we've always done it, or do we have any new way of thinking?
I think it's generally saying that where it recognises that there is capacity issues in terms of the local authority and key partners to develop this. So I would think we do have a strong approach to volunteer development. We have a good club support structure throughout within my service support development. But again, we can certainly provide more detail or specific paper on how we develop volunteers, and that comes right through from the apprenticeship program as well. We develop, Brian, so I can put something together for you on that.
That's fine. And just one further point on your opening presentation. You admitted to using the word aim. We aim to do this. That seems to be throughout the document. I was just wondering if we could admit that and just say we will ensure to do it. I think aim kind of it doesn't give you a target to reach for. It says we've tried the best we can. We aim to do that, but the reality is we're, you know, just trying to tie things in to make sure the commitments and plans are delivered. That's all.
Okay, no, that's point taken, Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the only thing I wanted to ask about, Nigel, was I couldn't find any reference to COVID-19 or the restrictions or anything in the document at all. And obviously the world ain't going to go back to how it was for quite a while, if ever. And I was just wondering whether the two documents need to reflect that somehow.
I think it's an absolutely very valid point, and unsurprising point you brought up there, Councillor Reid. What I can, in terms of assurance for members, I can absolutely assure members that the current facility developments that are taking place, they have been subject to essentially a COVID audit to essentially future-proof those and build on what we've learned so far. But in terms of these general documents, it's taken a while to get them signed off because they've had to go through all the individual governing bodies. There's been people on furlough, etc. So in terms of that time lag we've had, I would probably say that their completion would have been probably around this time 11 months ago, 12 months ago. So COVID wasn't the issue that it has become, but it certainly, I would think that's a very valid inclusion, if to make those more contemporary, to include a real careful consideration of what this means for our future provision. Now that people's exercise, as I said around the indoor facilities previously, people's exercise habits, people's sentiment towards exercise may well have changed, and the nature that people feel comfortable exercising may well be different. And I think that would be worthy of actually a separate report, Chair, which I'd be happy to put together.
Yeah, well, you know, it's going to affect the council and the services it delivers for a long time, so it does need to be borne in mind. I guess the committee is happy to accept the 5 recommendations that are going, or the 6 recommendations that are going to go to cabinet. I don't think we can add anything or subtract anything from that. It's up to them to decide whether they agree with the things or not. It's not our place, really. So I would just wish the document look, and hopefully it's flexible enough. 2031 still 10 years away. It's not set in stone. It is flexible, and it is a document that can be changed if need be. But you do have to have a direction to travel, and I think that's what this document actually is, rather than a set in stone thing. So if we're all happy just to wish the document look as it goes to cabinet, I shall move on to the next thing, which is Nigel again, I think, which is the Northumberland Public Library Service Consultation.
Thank you, Chair. It is indeed myself, and I'm also joined by Alison Peden. Alison Peden's on the call. Alison is our Library Service Manager. We joined the authority approximately 2 years ago. and has been instrumental in taking the service forward, and has provided great leadership throughout COVID. So Alison will be joining us, so it's not going to be 100% myself.
I see you. Welcome, Alison. Good to see you.
Okay. Again, I'll try and keep this fairly, I mean, again, it's an expansive document, this one, Councillor Reid, so it's thorough, it's robust, but I'll try and highlight some of the key points from it, and in terms of the rationale for our completed consultation and subsequent strategy. Thank you. So it's a significant report in terms of a number of factors. In terms of the council, the scale of resources involved, it's a large service, almost 70 FTE, with a value of just over £3 million total turnover. In terms of estates, we have 30 branches, we have a school library service, we have a prison library service, we have a home library service, and of course we have the mobile library service. It's also a statutory duty of local authorities under the Public Libraries and Museums Act 1964, the duty to provide a comprehensive and efficient library service for all persons. Now, the importance of libraries has been increasingly recognised, and particularly by the DCMS, beyond the traditional access to books, etc. So libraries are increasingly recognised as a key driver for health and well-being, building stronger communities and fostering economic growth. And I think we've seen that, Chair, through the past 12 months in terms of the response of the libraries. Fourthly, any changes to a service must be based on a robust consultation. If a consultation is not deemed to be robust, it can risk DCLG or even Secretary of State intervention. So the purpose of the report is to provide an overview of the key findings from the public consultation, identify the capacity and accessibility improvements and measures introduced during 1920, and it outlines a three-stage approach to service redesign based on evident need. So those recommendations are to note the completion of the library service consultation in accordance with the project brief, which is included, and to consider the findings of the study, agree a three-phase approach for the redesign of the library service based on A, strengthening the core service, B, establishment of library hubs within each locality area, and C, extending reach and partnerships. Members will also be asked to note the capacity and accessibility improvement measures introduced to the service during 2019 and 2020, and also to note progress on the development of a library service strategy 21-26. Okay, so just briefly on those key issues, in terms of national context, we've talked how DCMS are very strongly from the core, acknowledging key outcomes that libraries support. As a local authority and as a local library authority, we're very much shadowing this national strategy, particularly Libraries Deliver 2016 to 21, and particularly the use and the description of libraries as vital community hubs. It's something that we absolutely endorse. In terms of the key issues, 7 key outcomes are identified within the DCMS, which are how library services contribute to 7 critical outcomes to communities and individuals: cultural and creative enrichment, increased reading and literacy, improved digital access and literacy, helping everyone achieve their full potential, healthier and happier lives, greater prosperity, and building stronger, more resilient communities. Now, going back to the Northumberland context and Northumberland Library Service, the report notes that there's been significant structural and leadership changes. We carried out a review in 2017, which reflected these changes, and it showed that there was a need for a more robust consultation to create a sustainable model for delivery going forward. Hence, we then sought agreement for this extensive consultation, which was agreed by Council. Our consultation itself was carried out by SECO and Arm of SITFA. It lasted 12 weeks. Very, very strong response, 5,068 responses, included 30 drop-in sessions, in-depth telephone interviews. Very importantly, staff were actively engaged with 47 booklets completed, and also detailed discussion with stakeholders, including organisations such as parish town councils. In terms of findings, the full results are provided as an appendix, and I hope members have had a chance to look through. There's also a summary of the results in the background. The A good barometer for performance of the service is to look at how the service is delivering against 4 universal offers, which members will have heard me talk about before. These 4 universal offers, which are endorsed through Libraries Connected, the sector support organisation, are reading, information and digital, health and wellbeing, and culture and creativity. So these are the key outcomes in which the report provides a high-level overview of our performance, which are included. So in terms of the actual results at a high level, Alison will come in a little bit in a minute, but in terms of results, lending physical copies of books and resources was found to be the most important service. It was also found to be particularly important that the libraries offer a space that the communities can use, that they include local or history studies resources, and they provide computers or internet access. No major surprises there. But again, in terms of the role that libraries play, there's a very telling point, I find a very searching point in this, that the consultation found that for 1 in 10 library customers, it's the main way they access the internet or IT. But this rises to 46% of library users for those who are out of work and looking for work. So it just shows how much of a key service is for so many people. Very pleased to see from the report that in terms of strengths, 88% of responded rated the service as excellent or good, which is a very good result. Key strengths unprompted from respondents were the library staff, the free access to books and resources, and the reservation services. Again, very strong attributes in terms of helpful staff, the welcome, the pleasant place to visit, the knowledgeability of the staff, and the ease of access. Key areas headlined for improvement were the range of books offered, size of library and the layout of the library environment, and longer opening hours, so quite practical steps. In terms of taking in the service forward, we've identified 3 key elements, sorry, Chair, on this: strengthening the core service, the establishment of library hubs, and extending reach and partnership. I'm going to ask Alison just to come in for a couple of minutes now, Chair, just to talk around the strengthening the core service, to reflect on what has been done strategically, but what's also been done in response to COVID. So I'll just hand over to you briefly, Alison.
Thank you, Nigel. I think it's fair to say that, as Nigel said, some of the work that we've done has had the double whammy in that it's been in response to COVID, but it has furthered our response to some of the findings of the consultation. So you'll note that there was some concern about digital access and the ease of accessibility. We knew from the customer feedback we were getting on individual case basis that was in the main RB digital. So during this period, we have actually discontinued that, and now all our digital library provision is through BorrowBox, and that's been well received. We still do have an occasional customer to support with that, but it has been well received. And because of COVID, we've put additional resource into the digital resources, so we have been able to increase the number of titles quite significantly, and that is being well used. That the figure for February that was just in the digital issues were 21,616 titles were borrowed during the month, and that has been a month-on-month increase during this period. The licenses are expensive, so we have capitalised where we can on making our resources go further. And the latest one that is not noted there because it's more recent is that the Reading Agency are providing us through a funding award that we achieved in the new year with titles, both physical copies and digital copies, from their Reading Well collection, which will seek to support minimising the impact of COVID and contribute, to to work to help people's mental health and emotional well-being. Press Reader, we were able to take up a subscription to Press Reader, which offers a range of magazines and newspapers that, you know, we couldn't hope to achieve physically, and we will look to continue that subscription post-COVID, as we will many of the activities that have moved online. So, you know, we have online book groups, creative writing, family history, story time and craft sessions. One of the things that I think has come to the fore as part of our work is that, you know, we can deliver these sessions virtually, and people from across the county and nationally and even internationally, you know, have participated, and we would look to continue that, because obviously, you know, somebody in Berwick is unlikely to make the journey, say, to Hexham if an author event was in Hexham, but if that author event is virtual, people from across the county can attend. That's not to say that looking forward we wouldn't want people who maybe don't have access to the virtual world to miss out on that, and we will be seeking to have sort of a hybrid approach, so that if there is an author event virtually, that could be viewed in a group setting within a library in due course when we're allowed to do that again. So we've also obviously put a lot of time into the digital divide that people experience. You know, we do have a digital helpline, not a huge number of calls so far, but that's probably just as well, because the nature of some of those calls has required quite a lot of time and sort of intensive coaching for people for whom, you know, digital is a new set of skills that they're taking on board. But that work is bearing fruit, and we are working with colleagues, particularly the social prescribing link workers, who are acquiring digital devices, passing them on to their clients, and then we're working out how best to support them to take on those skills. And that's quite a different conversation when you're having it over the telephone, as opposed to being face to face with somebody in a branch setting. But we'll be looking to how that can develop as we move through and maintain both possibly the telephone contact as well as introducing that face-to-face contact as well. So in terms of the staffing, we have moved staff into position now where some of the outstanding temporary arrangements have been resolved, and we're marshalling the staff so that we can move to the new structure that will need to be in place ultimately as we move through the service redesign. We were very fortunate that as well as agreeing to the consultation, an award of £100,000 was made from the Strategic Management Reserve to support service redesign. And again, we bore in mind the results of the consultation as we've moved through this period. So where libraries have been relocated, we particularly sort of Alnwick and Ponteland and coming up Cramlington, we have invested and will invest in new stock there, and that certainly at Alnwick and Ponteland, as even, you know, through a select and collect model, has been very well received. So one of the other next things that we're looking at is the digital offer that we make. Desktop refresh has been completed. We will be renewing our self-service kiosks as part of the process, so the public will be able to do more for themselves, which will be particularly important to where we're co-located and the libraries are available for a significant number of hours beyond the staffed hours. Again, that provision is something that was flagged as part of the consultation, so we're pleased to be able to put that in place as we move forward. some of you may already be aware of our family history chat group that has over 100 regular participants, and that is a result of the appointment of a part-time local studies librarian, and our full-time librarian, who's based at Berwick, is already, you know, heavily involved with our social media output. But obviously, as we move back to face-to-face, we'll be making efforts to encourage the use of Berwick Library and the other libraries in the north of the county, because we are moving towards a new model of working, so that the librarians will operate very much in an outreach model. This again has been tested out as part of COVID, because we supported the pop-up initiatives in communities during the summer last year, and we actually had a member of staff who was seconded to support the summer camps delivered by Leading Link. That is a model that we will repeat this summer, and you know, the library service is embedded within the Plan 21 programme of activities for children and young people this year. I think the other thing I'd like to draw your attention to is that as part of our response to COVID, we did establish a series of befriending calls to our vulnerable customers in the over 70s age bracket. That has taken root, and we've had some wonderful feedback from customers, you know, who have really appreciated that continued conversation about books and reading. And that again was one of the factors in us acquiring funding from the Reading Agency that has allowed us to develop our Reading Friends model. That has been extended, so the customers we're supporting now are also new mums who are expecting or have had babies during this period. And what we're going to look to do as part of the transition back to the physical face-to-face is that where people want to meet together in the library, obviously we'll support that transition. But you know, there may be people who wish to remain as telephone reading friends, and we'll be looking to maintain that as part of our offer going forward. We have done some work in terms of marketing and awareness, and I think again that you know, we've used social media and the various aspects of that more during COVID. As we move back into the new normal, we will look again at the other materials that we produce. Little did we know when we produced our Rediscover Your Northumberland Library leaflet late in 2019 how useful that title would be as we move through into 2021. But we will look to obviously market and increase awareness of the service and the offers we can make as we move into the post-COVID scenario. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you.
Thanks. That was very thorough. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anyone wish to make comment or say anything about on this?
Jeff, I just had another 2 minutes, if that's okay. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Sorry. Yeah. So we've just to recap there, Alison's talked about in terms of strengthening the core service as phase A. Phase B is we, as I mentioned earlier, as England's largest and most sparsely populated county, as is the case with sport and leisure, providing an effective and sustainable library service cannot be achieved through a standardised model of operation. It's the paradox we face. You quite simply cannot provide the full range of services full-time across 30 sites in terms of staffing, resources, opening hours, etc. So the model, our vision is 5 hub libraries, which would then curate the universal offers we talked about previously, to curate those 4 universal offers across each locality. So that would be through the walk-in, through home library, through the doorstep delivery, with digital at its core, we would provide services absolutely based on evident need from that locality, because as we know, it's a very, very diverse county facing different issues and opportunities greatly. So we've put in the report the criteria by which we've considered which of those libraries should become hubs, and we are recommending that Berwick, Morpeth, Cramlington, Blythe and Hexham become the library hubs. Now, it's to stress, this is not pulling out of areas, this is just freeing up capacity to be able to deliver what was absolutely specified as priorities within the consultation. And then phase C, which is ongoing, is really that extending reach and partnership. So again, looking at the gaps we have through where our smaller libraries are, satellite libraries, and how we can complement that, how we can essentially forge local partnerships that can truly serve local need in a flexible way, working closely, Chair, with Northumberland community together on that. So it is really a whistle-stop tour, and I do appreciate support of members over the COVID period as well in terms of championing the services through our local libraries. I just want to finish by saying personally, I'm very, very proud I am Chair of the service and what they've achieved. Okay, thank you.
You've got every reason to be proud, Nigel. Does anyone wish to comment on this, or? Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, first of all, I just want to echo Nigel and thank all the library service staff on the way they adapted to and sort of responded to the COVID challenge and the crisis. I'm happy that the consultation results actually highlighted the importance of the libraries, and particularly how the public appreciate the professional staff that work within it. So I'm really happy with that, and I think this plan sort of progresses how that's going to go forward. Yeah. My only concern with the satellites, Nigel, is the fact that we've got a lot of places still that are lacking in digital connectivity. I know that will be addressed, and hopefully it'll push things along from both sort of sides now. But that is a real sort of hurdle, I think, that has to be overcome.
And I think Councillor Dunn, in response to that, Chair, that adopting this model where we prioritise our efforts and our services according to local need, we'll be able to identify, Councillor Dunn, those areas that need, should we need reinforced digital services, particularly in introducing people to digital and that capability, because I've said previously, we've got a very strong digital hub now, but people need the confidence and the equipment to be able to access that to fully benefit it. So that's hopefully, Councillor Dunn, that will allow us to have quite a dynamic approach to where we identify issues such as digital access. We can actually target it specifically. We can effectively move the resource. We can move the resources across the service to focus on certain areas as need be. So that's the basic strategy going forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Happy with that, Liz?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. And Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I've got to echo my colleagues' congratulations through these difficult times. You and your staff have managed to function and deliver to the community in the best way you possibly could. So a thank you to you, and could you pass that on to your staff?
I shall do.
Just a couple of points on the recommendations again, coming down to recommendation 4, where it says note the progress of the development of the library service strategy 2021 to 2026. Obviously, you know, this is something that we're going to note, and it's a work in progress. So what I would ask of you is that we have yearly updates to the committee. Now that doesn't, I'm mindful of, you don't have to have a committee presence, but as long as that information comes through, that we are reassured that the programme that is in front of us works and is working. And the other thing is, on the back of that, on the tail end of that is, as soon as you hit issues or problems, please, by all means, contact the committee in itself. That would be off the recommendations. I just picked up on a couple of things that you said around libraries around Northumberland, and there would be hubs. Ashington Library wasn't mentioned in that, and I was just wondering, you know, where does that come under the strategy, and where does that come under the hub level? Sorry.
Okay, yep, that Chair, if I may come in. Thank you, Brian. Yes, I mean, I'll be absolutely straight. It was a question we did anticipate, and we had a lot of internal deliberation about this, but we've built criteria for what should be the best possible community hub location, and it's not just based on geography. There's a set of criteria which we pulled out of the consultation of what we feel people would expect from that type of hub library, and it's not in any way to suggest that the quality is not there in these other services. Sorry, in these other facilities. It's to say that some are more suitable to be a hub. Now, Ashington is a very highly valued, well-used facility, and it will continue to be, and it will absolutely be key to that provision that's coordinated through that for that locality. So again, it's not a reflection on the quality of Ashington Library whatsoever, because it's a high quality facility that's highly valued. It's particularly in terms of, I would say, in terms of the flexibility and access to space as we require it. You know, it's probably more appropriate for us within Blythe.
Great, thank you. And just okay. Chair, if it's all right, just one more question on page 3 of the document. Point 1, where it says at the bottom, where it's self-completion of a survey for individuals, including children and young people aged under 16. Have you a breakdown of those figures?
I think I'm going to refer to my colleague Alison on that, who'll probably come in now.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. It's fair to say that we didn't have a huge response from under 16s, and I think the response that we did get, obviously, it was supported by the parents. Completing a form with their child, but submitting it independently under the child's name. But 25% of respondents did have children aged 16 or under living at home. So a lot of their responses were couched in terms of their use of the library as a family. We did do, in addition, some work with the Youth Council to gather their thoughts as representatives of that age group within the county. And you've reminded me that another thing that we did that actually wasn't documented is we invited all schools to participate, because as you're probably aware, as part of the primary curriculum, there is a letter writing exercise, and that, you know, we thought that would be a nice real life example of a letter they could write that would contribute. And if this hadn't been a digital forum, I would have been happy to have presented the letters that we did receive, not from many schools, but you know, some classes did embrace this, and I do have letters that I can share with you if you're interested from children about what the library means to them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dunn has a hand raised.
Thank you. I'm just going back to page 7 of the report, Nigel, and the bit that says it mentions the staffing structure being created. Am I right in thinking that this staffing structure, there are no job losses or anything that are going through this? No. And my second question really quickly is about the mobile library service. How do you see that going forward?
Okay, on the first point, I can assure you there's no posts been reduced. We've actually increased the number of professional librarians we have now, Councillor Dunn. The staffing structure being created, that staffing structure is building on the positives of what we've got, but in preparation for this move to the library hubs and locality working. So, and it's also there was a number of fixed term arrangements in place which we've managed to fortunately address as well to make those roles permanent. And on the second point, on the mobiles, again, Alison may well come in, but what's come out from the consultation I'm sure members will reflect as well on this, that they have from constituents. The mobile library service is highly valued. We do need to look at sustainability of it and how we can complement that with the learning that we have from COVID in terms of the doorstep delivery, in terms of the befriending, and in terms of the work we're doing in Northumberland Community Together in the locality support. Alison, remind me what they're called, support planners. So I would see it would be the mobiles becoming more integrated into what we do in terms of the outreach. Councillor Dunn.
Okay, are you all right with that, Liz? Yeah. Anyone else?
Yes, thank you.
No, I don't see anyone else wishing to say anything, so I shall just have a two Pennyworth at the end. It's been a long, hard slog, this, Nigel, hasn't it, really? You've put a lot of work into it, and you've done it over a period where you know, the extraordinary times in which we live. It'll be interesting to see how, going forward, this all kind of unwinds with the restrictions and COVID. You might need to come back and tweak this a little bit. I think if you know, if things sort of go in the wrong direction again, you might have to revisit it. The councillors here just need to remember that the recommendations are for Cabinet and not for us. So, you know, we don't need to agree or disagree with them, really. You can, if you wish to say something, that'll be put in the minutes and the report of the meeting. If when I go to Cabinet, I'll regurgitate them then. But other than that, I just think it's you know, you deserve a medal. And it's probably Alison that deserves a medal rather than you. But
thank you.
know, well done. You know, it's clear. It has a point. You've got conclusions. You know, well done. Okay. So we wish luck again as it makes its trip to the next table, and we look forward to seeing you all again at some point. Don't feel as though you need to stay. I'm sure there's other things you could be entertaining yourself with, other than just drawn on.
Okay, so thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
No trouble. The next thing on the agenda is D, which is the inspection of the fire and rescue service. Sorry, I'm a dyslexic moment there. And from what I understand, Graham, who has been very patient, is going to guide us through this, but I don't know whether John Riddle wants to speak first. Is that how this is going to work? Carry on then, John, and then we'll have Graham. I think that's the way it is. If that's not right, somebody, you know, tell me. So, John.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I'm sorry I had internet problems earlier on as well, but I managed to
We've
get.
all had them today, John, so don't worry about it.
Yeah. I think just before Graham does introduce this, just a few things to say. You know, the HMI, the Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabularies and Fire and Rescue Services, we come under their statutory and independent inspection regime. We've had one full inspection. We'll have another full inspection, which actually the document work is starting now, which will start in June, I would imagine, or thereabouts this next year, on, well, either on site or virtually, or a combination of both. And, you know, I just want people to remember that this inspection that we've had in the middle of inspection, routine ones, was a thematic inspection specifically to see how fire services throughout the country had performed in the face of COVID and how they'd helped, etc. And I think it's also worth remembering, you know, that we are the smallest mainland brigade in the UK, and we have a huge area to cover as well, and a, you know, small budget and a very dedicated staff. The thematic inspection took place during August 2020, and there were some interviews that were in October, and you know, they were quite thorough. Interviewed me, different officers, different partners, etc., to get a feel of how things had gone. I'll not say too much about it, other than the fact that it was, in my mind, very positive. You know, not saying there's not one or two lessons to be learned, and you know, we take that on board. But you know, the other thing I want to say is I'm very pleased to welcome Graham Binning to you all. A lot of you might not actually have met Graham before, but Graham is our latest addition to the senior management team at Fire and Rescue, and he's Deputy Chief Fire Officer. I'll let Graham introduce himself. He's got a wealth of experience and he's a great asset to us here in Northumberland. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Go on then, Graham.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. And yeah, thanks for that introduction, John. I'm delighted to represent the Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service today. I'm equally delighted to be, as John says, their newest member. And as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not a local boy. However, Northumberland is a place that's been part of my life all my life, and I look forward to at some point talking to some of you about my strong family links to a wonderful county. To move on to the subject of today's paper, it was yourself, Chair, Councillor Reid, that asked for us to come and give an overview of the COVID thematic inspection. The HMI, they were commissioned, as John said, in August by the Home Secretary, and it was to inspect how fire and rescue services in England were responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, unprecedented response arrangements for any fire and rescue service, let alone, as Councillor Riddle correctly said, you know, with the challenges of the geography and scale of our service. So the HMI were asked to consider what was working well and what lessons could be learned. We were inspected physically between the 12th and 23rd of October on our pandemic response up to and including that date. The outcome report was published on the 22nd of January, which you have as part of your paper pack today. It was a very positive feedback, which stated that our service had adapted and responded very well to the pandemic. We were effective and we supported both Northumberland County Council and the Local Resilience Forum. Of the three inspection pillars which the HMI can consistently inspect on, those are effectiveness, efficiency and people. The HMI across all of their inspection programmes across England, it's the people pillar which generally causes them greatest concern. I can honestly say that this was not the case at all during the inspection of Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service. There were areas, as Councillor Riddle said, of recommendation which we have considered very carefully, and we did actually submit some comments at the pre-publication stage on a couple of the issues that they'd raised, and I'll mention a couple of those now. One of them was community risk profiles, about us ensuring that protection and prevention activity remained focused on the areas at highest risk. We absolutely continue to focus our activity on the areas at highest risk, but in line with HMI recommendations, we will continue to forward look and be adaptive wherever possible to any improvements that can be made. They also mentioned our organisational speed of response to the National Fire Chief's guidance on protection. This is actually an area where our comments were fully accepted and the narrative was in fact changed. I think this reflects the fact that Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service did respond to the guidance, but we simply took a little time to actually implement it. They also mentioned, as they often do within the HMI reports, whole-time firefighter productivity. This, as a theme, is consistent across all HMI reports, and a response was sent to HMI to reflect the conscious early decision that we made as a service to protect our ability to respond to emergency incidents, and how this is particularly critical in a fire and rescue service as lean as Northumberland is. Our concern within this theme was that the narrative could actually lead to a perception that firefighters were not productive and fully engaged on all aspects of their role, which is simply really not the case. Areas of notable practice which were highlighted in the report, which you have included, and I'm delighted to say, staff wellbeing. It was a priority of our service. We also recognise, though, that Northumberland County Council was a huge part in this, played a huge part in this rather. For example, the wellbeing support arrangements and individual risk assessments that were made available to us through Northumberland County Council. Also, the active engagement of the Fire and Rescue Authority and the Chief Fire Officer throughout the response to the pandemic, and that was to ensure that we were regularly engaging in discussions relating to the service's ability to discharge our statutory functions. And finally, the HMI also recognised that we were able to act quickly in developing new ways of working, from collaborating with our local partners to delivering online youth initiatives. For example, our Prince's Trust programme, which for the first time ever delivered a full programme virtually. And we also delivered innovative ideas to engaging with our local businesses to deliver appropriate and relevant fire safety advice. So overall, the report positively reflects extremely strong relationships across Northumberland County Council and Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service, and it does underline a strong approach to our people and staff well-being being a priority. I think it's really important to reflect as well that as a new principal officer to Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service, I'm taking in a new service. I'm incredibly impressed at the amount of work, the commitment and dedication which has taken place since the HMI inspection, the full HMI inspection in 2009. The next round of HMI inspections, as John said, will be between now, it started now and this summer, and where the findings of round one inspection in 2019 and this COVID inspection will be followed up. I think in summary, to finish up, it's really important for me as a new principal officer to reflect to members today the ongoing support that we've had during our continual improvement cycle, both now and evolving going forward. And to name a few, we are working very closely now with internal audit and Kevin MacDonald. We're working with Patrick Price with regards to equality, diversity and integrity. We talk and work on a weekly basis with the innovation and improvement team with Lou Hayward and Mike Bird. We have the ongoing support from Anne Bridges, the Director of Communications. And finally, last but not least, from Kath McAvoy, the Exec Director, with her unerring support of our current development of a refreshed collaborative approach towards our partnership safeguarding interventions. So, like I said, it's lovely to be in front of you for the first time. I look forward at some point to meeting you all and in due course reporting back on the findings of the full HMI inspection. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Any questions? No, we all seem to be content. I would just thank you for that. And it's good sometimes when you feel that something is right, then you get confirmation from somebody else. It kind of reinforces reinforces what we've always known, which is that the service is well run. It's staffed by some great people, and they're doing a difficult job in very difficult circumstances very well. And Northumberland, as John said, it's the smallest service in the biggest space, so it's got some challenges. So I think we're really pleased with that. And if we could just be continually, next time you've got something to say, get in contact with Sean and get on our agenda. That'd be great. I don't know whether John wishes to end on
just to thank you for those comments, Chairman. I think one thing that Graham didn't mention was the fact that we also, during this COVID time, ran our first in-house training session for firefighters. First time we've done that in 40 years, and it was very, very successful, and it's something that we are going to continue because it worked very well and it produced the goods for us very well and very efficiently. Thank you for your comments.
Brilliant. If you can stay, Graham, but I'm sure you've got better things to do. So I don't think any of us will be any of us will be upset if you decide to go. And I think you're staying with us, John, anyway, for the next one, are you?
Well, I'm staying with you. It's actually on the agenda, I think, as Glenn Sanderson on my agenda, but I'll be here anyway.
Next, we've got the infrastructure statement. Anyway, sorry. Back to the agenda. Thanks once again, Graham. Look forward to seeing you in person at some point.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, so we're now at E, which is a Northumberland infrastructure funding statement. And I don't know there we are. Rob, are you gonna kick off with this?
Yes, I will do, Jeff. Thank you.
Carry on.
Yeah, what this is about our entire approach to Section 106 agreements. I've been looking at this in great detail, and the historic approach we've been using has been pretty inconsistent. And I think there's a risk of us under recovering the money we actually do agree. There's a risk of us not asking for the right amount in the first place, and then there's a risk of us not spending the right amount according to the timescale. So what I've done, I've looked into an audit of the entire process from beginning to end, and also looked at good practice and from other authorities. And I've also tried to report on a way which is a bit more publicly understandable. So you'll see the first go at doing an annual statement on infrastructure contributions via 106, and you'll see that it goes through the different types of things we ask for, how we spend them, and the approach we're taking. This is the start of a journey, but I am concerned that some of the historic approaches we have taken, as I said, we didn't ask for funds in the correct way. There's a real risk of us not being able to secure them. So this is an attempt to bring it to be more consistent, to be more transparent, and to provide better information to members and the public. When the new local plan is in place, and there's been significant progress on that in the last few days, we will have a fully costed way of asking for infrastructure contributions. So I'm hoping then to much more involve on a fundamental level both members and parish and town councils in how we do this. But this is the first step in a revised and refreshed approach. Thank you.
Well, very succinct and very to the point as always. Thank you very much. Does anyone wish to comment on this at all? It doesn't look as though that. Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Welcome to the report. I welcome the report, and I do believe it's needing this 106 agreements has needed to be looked at and reshuffled and put in a fair way. In the past, we can only talk past tense where there has been officers reduced because they thought that certain parties had paid enough money, that they'd reduced the funds that should have been repaid back to the community. There's also been a high risk of losing money in the last months of when the commitments have come from planning applications. And I can mention one about the Kentucky Fried Chicken in Ashington. It was a matter of months and we're going to lose that money. And the thing is, my concern is the lost money past tense. So this policy coming forward reassures me that, that the monies will be collected. And when agreements are made at the very beginning, with that both parties stick to that. Big developments, when they change their plans, i.e. maybe a housing estate, when they change their plans, they change their contributions as they go through there as well. And I don't think that should be their plans. If they want to change them and if they're accepted, and if the 106 agreement benefits more from the original plans, that's great. But if it reduces from the original plans, I don't think that should be considered. And I think the big thing around this is enforcement. When we say things, let's stick to it. And when people commit and say they've got to put issues or things in place, and this is not just all about monies, it's about commitments of a play area. When they say they're going to put a play area, they've got to put a one down there, and it's got to be a certain standard. So I welcome it, and I just think the enforcement has to be as strong as the policy can make it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. So I've got Rupert next, but if Rob wanted to come back on that, he could.
Yeah. Thanks, for that, Brian. And you are right on that point. And what this also will hopefully resolve is that the agreements will be more enforceable, and we'll have to follow them up better, because some of the historic ones I've seen have had things like a 2-year period when we have to spend the money, and that's tantamount to saying that the developer doesn't have to pay the money given that period. Okay, thanks.
Okay, Rupert.
My question's about the CIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, which I have heard absolutely nothing about till this paper came through. But I mean, well, first bullet point, CIL is a fixed non-negotiable charge on most development of 100 square meters or more, or a new dwelling house, sorry, new dwelling of any size. But well, where does that finish? Because you're getting to some pretty small projects there. I mean, you could be bringing in sort of extension on houses and sheds on farms and even listed building consents for certain things, because it's all development.
Yep. Via Jeff. Yeah, that is the case. Yeah, can I just say what it is that government are talking about making further changes to the way that developer contributions are implemented. You can already use the Community Infrastructure Levy. At the moment, we do not use it, but this is putting the marker down. In the future, we may look to a more of a tariff-based system rather than a legal agreement-based system. It will be subject, though, to a full viability assessment to make sure that the economy of the county can take it, and it would need to go through an inspector for it to be agreed. The big issue is that the planning white paper, which was issued last year, does moot a more general move to a levy-based approach. And we're just saying that this is one of the mechanisms which may take place in the future. Section 106 is meant to be a subset of that, but we only use 106 here in the county. Okay.
Yeah, I think, Rupert, it's a government, it's not something we've dreamed up, you know, it's the government that decided that CIL is the way to go forward. So it's, you know, in the end, we'll be told that that's what we have to do, and it'll have to be done that way. So
is it thought it's going to be quite a few years down the road? Because this page here is, in my mind, fairly frightening.
The issue is that what level you charge CIL at is dependent on your markets, and it could well be because of the pricing in our economy that actually a big chunk of the county would have a zero rate, and the issue then would be, how do we fund schools and school places and healthcare and roads, etc. So it may be better for us to use 106 in the future, but we would need to do the calculations to see which was the most advantageous way forward.
So it's really undecided. So, and that's why
it could be on its way, but we'll have to look at this one.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. You satisfied with that, Rupert? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Anyone else? Can I just ask you then, Rob, in the past, why was it thought these kind of restrictions on, you know, we'll spend the money within 2 years? We must at some point thought that was a good idea. So what kind of changed? I mean, this will go back all the way to the 6 districts, I guess.
Yeah, it does. All I can say is that I've looked at this objectively, and I think that we can do it better. And there was, I would say, an inconsistent approach. And I think perhaps in the past as well, when developers pleaded poverty, we took a flexible approach, but we weren't consistent in how we were flexible.
Yeah, well, that's because we were 6 districts.
Yeah, and also there's good practice and case law to learn from in this, Jeff, as well.
Yeah, good. Well, I'll just going to say, Brian, yeah.
Sorry, for just very quickly, just something as you're talking, the 106 money, is it a possible thing to do to highlight the ward councillors wherever that build is, that there is 106, and let them know exactly what they can do with that 106 and let them know exactly what the figure is. Because there's one or two times where it's sneaked under the barrier, and I know when I was chair of planning, there was people weren't aware of that there was a 106 agreement. And the other side is obviously there's strategic and there's local plans as well. So keeping them up to date of what's happening in their areas on them both parties.
Yeah. One of the other changes that's been introduced is that we now put on section 106 reports on the planning committee agenda paper, so you can see what's been collected and what's been agreed over the last few months in that particular patch. You're right there, it's a good point, Brian, because actually when we put together what the requests need to be for, say, education, for healthcare, for new roads, for affordable housing, all those important things, when you add all that up, it often comes to more than a particular scheme can stand. So we have to look at it in an area with a particular scheme, what the most important issue is at that time, okay? And I feel there's an important member role in there in saying, actually, in this area at this time, this issue is really important, say affordable housing. Whereas in another place, something like a new GP surgery could be more important. But it's important, though, to make sure that all the different departments and services who require funding make the full request, and then we can apportion what's affordable out of that. Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to make the same joke as I did in the pre-meeting because I still think it's funny. The document with the Northumberland infrastructure funding statement, the first photograph doesn't have any infrastructure on it.
Yeah, that's because we didn't get enough money to build the hospital there, Jeff. That's why.
I think that's funny. Anyway, for a first stab, I think, you know, having never done it before, I think it's a very good idea. And it, you know, always be open, honest, and transparent, and then you know, nobody can ever come back and have a go at you. You've written it all down, it's there. Nobody can say later on, oh well, you didn't tell us about that £7.5 million. Oh yes, we did. So well done. I would like to think that if you're going to produce this every December, that it, before you do it or just after you do it, it should come to scrutiny. Just to have a look at it first. You know, well done, really.
Thanks.
You know, and if you only think the only criticism I've got is, you know, the photograph on the front, well, you're doing well.
Thank you, Jeff.
So, but yeah, and are we going to? It looks as though it's a document at the moment, but I don't suppose you're going to make many copies of them.
No, it'll go online.
Yeah, so I was going to say, can we make certain that it's somewhere where people can?
We'll do. And I will be useful. I've also circulated like a balance sheet one, which puts it different. That shows what cash we've got in hand at the moment, and that will change from week to week. So that'll be a live document. Oh, excellent.
And the only slight criticism I would say about it is when I saw the title of this and started to turn the pages, it took me a little while to dawn on me that we were talking about 106.
Yeah,
so is there somehow we can put in there use of 106 money, or, you know, so it's straight away people can see what we're doing, what it is.
We get the funding through a variety of schemes, and I negotiate other funds by other routes as well, but they are all developer contributions, and maybe that's a clearer way of putting it.
Yeah, that's something. Just you know, and then it's straightforwardly seen that we're open, honest, and transparent, and the developers are told they've got to give us £1 million, and they've given us £500,000, and we are going to make damn sure we're going to get the other half.
Right.
Is the, you know, it would be the thrust. I didn't know, Colin hasn't raised his hand or spoken, but it is kind of in his territory. So I didn't know whether he wanted to contribute anything at all about it. Sorry, I didn't mean to drop you in it, Colin. Just
no, you just check I'm awake, Jeff. No, but the sale. I mean, this has been something that's been talked about for quite a few years.
Yeah.
And I'm just surprised that we still haven't really. It still really isn't in place. I mean, Rob will know better than me how long various governments have been talking about this, but it's been a fair number of years. I mean, this community infrastructure levy, we've all known about it, but nothing ever seems to happen. We all just talk about Section 106, and then you probably hit the nail on the head, Jeff. It would be better if we just called it, you know, developers, whatever.
Yeah,
because the man in the street, when you talk to people about planning, the person in the street says, "Oh, well, what's a Section 106?" So sometimes it'd be better to put into layman's terms, but Rob might know better than me how long this has been on the go.
Right. Okay. It's the issue about what suits us best. Okay. And the best example I can give you is that I inherited a decision at Sheffield to introduce community infrastructure levy, and we were getting £8 million a year in. Okay, which sounds good, but as ever, this is a policy instrument designed with the southeast of England in mind. And I'm aware that some districts were getting £200 million a year in the south of England, because it's all to do with land values. I think the risk is for us is that community infrastructure levy applies to every development. Section 106, just the big ones. I think that with our markets, that if we ran a sill-based system, the total amount of money we could get in may be lower than a 106-based system. So we would need to do some really careful work to make sure it's worth us doing it. Otherwise, we could be doing ourselves out of important money for affordable housing.
excellent. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Jeff, could I come back there?
Of course you can.
When the SIL was first discussed quite a long time ago, there was a lot of concern that with 106 contributions, you usually find it's spent reasonably locally to where that development is. You know, the health service in that area, the medical practices, the schools. But with the SIL, I mean, Rob will put me right here. Is that contribution as local, or it can be spread all over actually a authority area, whereas 106 money isn't?
Right, it's more complex than that. Right, in a parished area, the parish automatically gets 15% of the SIL take in their area. If they've got a made neighbourhood plan, they automatically get 25% of the SIL take. You are meant to spend it in the area it arises. But clearly, if you have half the county area being of high values and half of it low, the low value areas could end up getting loads of development, but no SIL. And the high value areas will get a limited amount of development and loads of SIL. So you can apportion parts of it to strategic priorities, which would be in different parts of the county, but the bulk of it is meant to be spent locally, though. Okay.
Okay. So that, I think we're all happy, but are we all happy that we ask for it, the next one, to come to us at some point? Yes.
Right.
So if we could just, Sean could, he's still here, if Sean could note that at some point we would like this document, whatever it's called in the future, to be brought to scrutiny. Either
Jeff, I've got that.
Slightly after it's been published, and maybe we can compare this year's with the next one. Yeah, that's a good idea, doesn't it? Then let's just hope some of us are still here to do it. So the next, thanks Rob. I don't know whether you don't need to stay if you're not in the next one's summer maintenance, so I don't suppose you need to stay. In fact, he's gone already. Look at that. Right, who's doing this? Oh, Paul, excellent. What a pleasure. How are you today?
Thank you very much.
Excellent. So carry on, sir.
So this was really just to highlight the performance of the grounds maintenance service over the summer period and into the winter. And I'm sure you'll all be pleased to know it's a positive report. it details the real difference that the service has been making to maintain a high quality local environment across the county, which I think in this year out of all years has been especially important in terms of maintaining people's health and well-being, and making sure that when people are out in their local area in green spaces and just exploring the countryside in and around their community area, that they're experiencing a high quality local environment to do that in. The report also just covers some of the areas we're identifying for further improvements. So I'm not going to take you through the minutiae, the detail of the report. What I intend to do is just to highlight some of the key elements. I think the first one is just to really highlight the working practices this year. This year is the first year that we've had in place our new seasonal working hours. You'll recall that as part of the budget savings in the last financial year, we introduced what we describe as seasonal working hours, and this is really just trying to better align the grounds maintenance staff's working patterns to the growing seasons that we face, so that they work longer hours during the summer, shorter hours during the winter. That delivered a saving of £110,000, and whilst I think there was some reticence and reluctance from the teams to start with, they now really welcome and enjoy the new working patterns, and it's been working really well for them, both personally as well as for us in terms of the service delivery. On the grass cutting, we aim to cut, our standard is 10 to 13 cuts per year. This year has been quite challenging in terms of warm and wet weather, so sometimes difficult to actually get on to cut grass because of the ground conditions, and then obviously when you get warm wet weather, the grass comes away very quickly as well. We have managed, despite all of the issues around COVID and having to adapt our working procedures and practices and a short cessation of service whilst we just adapted those services when the first lockdown was announced, that we have been able to deliver that high standard of grass cutting across the whole county. And in those areas where we also deliver enhanced standards over and above that, where we have environmental partnerships, we've also delivered those enhanced standards across the county, with one notable exception, which was in the Cramlington area, where we achieved between 17 and 18 cuts against a standard of 20. And for a number of reasons, that being one of them. The only disappointing part of the whole grounds maintenance activity this year is that Cramlington Town Council have decided to withdraw from the partnership agreement we have with them. We're still working with them in terms of other service areas, but they've moved away from that now. In terms of verge cutting activity, as I'm sure you're all aware when you're driving around the county, that's one of the key activities, both in terms of safety for people using the highways to make sure they've got good sight lines, and that's for drivers as well as pedestrians and horse riders and things such as that. But it's also an important aspect just in terms of the actual maintenance of the highway network. We don't want vegetation encroaching on the network, blocking drains, reducing carriageway widths and things such as that. But there's also a lot of constraints in terms of the ecological impacts of verge maintenance. So we are conscious of that, and we adapt our plans to suit that as well. So we have been able to get on and do all of that work this year. I think the key thing there is that just to recognise that conservation value aspect, the team have been working very closely with Natural England, the AONBs and Northumberland National Park and some other conservation groups as well. And we now have designated an additional 10 verges. So there's over 80 locations across the county where there's particular wildlife and conservation interest in the verges, that we actually now cut those on a different cycle to a slightly different standard, so that we support the reseeding of those special plants and support the conservation in those areas to really, you know, highlight the benefits of some of that for the wider community. Weed control is one of our areas that I think creates a lot of angst in the county, and this year's been no different than others. It has been, I think, quite a difficult year in terms of, again, the weather conditions. If you're not familiar with some of the weed treatment activity, there are now quite rigid restrictions on the types of chemical weed killers you can actually apply, that we have to use effectively contact herbicides that on hard surfaces, so we can only apply that directly to the plants themselves that have no residual weed killing activity. So you have to allow the weeds to grow to be able to then tackle them and to take that forward. There are also quite a lot of constraints in terms of the weather conditions that you can apply that weed treatments to, which again creates issues. And this year in particular, just because of the sheer volume of parked cars around the town centres and urban areas, that again has created an added difficulty for us. But the teams have been on with that and have had a good bash at that, despite some of those constraints. In terms of tree works, the highlights there are really that our top priority works where we undertake for safety reasons, works to trees within 7 working days. We've achieved all of the standards across the service on that. So on 38 separate occasions we've been out and sorted that so people weren't put at risk. We've also completed all of our priority 2 work, which is basically non-urgent but essential works over a 12-month period, and that's involved over 852 separate individual works to trees. So, you know, the team have covered quite a significant workload, and they've also made a good inroad to the non-essential but desirable works, which is where we have a bigger issue where they've tackled over 720 separate tasks to try and get on top of that. That is still a concern for us in that long-term, like non-essential, we'll get down to it when we can get down to it type activity is something that generates a lot of complaints. So we are due to review our tree strategy at the moment. We were going to do that this year, but for other obvious reasons, we've been delayed in doing that. So that is something we're going to be taking forward next year. And one of the key focuses on that will be looking at the approach to those lower priority works as to how we can try and tackle that and get through some of that or adopt a different approach to it. The other aspect of that tree strategy work will be looking at our tree planting policy and what we can do to support climate change. And obviously we want to do as much tree planting as we possibly can. We have, as the report outlines, been successful this year in both the Urban Tree Challenge Fund, where we secured £265,000 from government for a supported tree programme to improve tree cover in the urban areas in the county. And we've undertaken the first phase of that, where we've planted 374 larger trees, so standard trees, across southeast Northumberland to improve both the visual amenity in those areas as well as the ecology and the biodiversity. And phase 2 of that work is due in the current financial year now, where we'll be planting another 259 larger trees in Blythe, Bedlington, Chopperton, Hexham and Prudhoe, so down the Tyne Valley, some of that work as well in the coming year. As part of the trees as well, we've also undertaken the free tree scheme, and that was part of the climate change promotional activity and community engagement activity that we undertook this year. That was really, really successful. It got a tremendous response from members of the public. We had over 15,000 separate requests to take on a free tree. We have been somewhat hampered by the pandemic in terms of being able to distribute those free trees. We had our 2 distribution events, or periods, rather we're doing multiple events, but 2 periods where we're going to be doing that. We had to cancel the first one because of the lockdown measures and then rearrange the second. But we have been successful in distributing over 10,000, nearly 10,000 of those trees, and the balance we're actually undertaking the tree planting activity ourselves just to make sure that we actually get them in the ground and we get the value out of those across the county. We are going to be reviewing the free tree scheme for the coming year. It is something where there's a provision within the budget to continue this on an annual basis. We are going to be reviewing that in terms of just looking at how we balance the scheme and whether or not we do a little bit more and offer more in terms of schools and community groups and to get them involved and engaged in that activity this year. On floral planting, as I'm sure you'll all be aware, unfortunately this year because of the pandemic, there hasn't been in bloom competitions that we normally do extremely well of across the county with supporting the town and parish councils and other groups in that process. We have still been doing lots of floral planting though. So basically, whilst they haven't been getting judged, they've still been getting put out there. So our teams this year, through our nurseries at Stakeford and up in Alnwick as well, have grown and planted nearly 250,000 plants and put them out across the county in our parks and in those other community spaces. On our parks and green spaces, we put forward our parks to the Green Flag accreditation each year, which is a nationally recognised quality standard in terms of the quality of the green spaces that we operate and manage. And last year we were successful in getting 9 of those green flags. This year we've been successful in increasing that to 11 green flags, which is something the team as a whole are extremely proud of, and rightly so, with the 2 new parks being Hurst Park in Ashington, that was subject to a major heritage lottery funding improvement and renovation scheme that's now been completed, and that's come back onto the green flag status after having dropped off it whilst those works were undertaken. And for the first time ever, the Eastwood Park in Prudhoe has now also been accredited as a green flag park, and that's a real credit to the community down there, to the team down there that have worked together to really uplift that park and become a real valuable community asset now. Last but not least is just looking at the winter grounds. Obviously, we have been on with the winter grounds maintenance activity where we do hedge cutting, tree works. That has been somewhat hampered by the awful weather we've been having in terms of those teams then having to be redeployed from some of that grounds maintenance activity onto winter services, gritting, paving in and around the town centres and snow clearance activity. But they are still on with that work and will continue with that as we move now into the summer season, just finish that off. And in terms of future service improvements, there's a couple of things that are mentioned in the report. The first one's around electric powered hand tools. Obviously, with a large workforce and a big county to keep on top of, we have a lot of strimmers, chainsaws, hedge cutters, and you name it, that are all basically petrol driven appliances. We have been switching those to battery powered and been undertaking trials, and a lot of that kit's been really well received by the teams. We're finding it's both lighter for them to use, so there's less kind of manual handling stress, but also less vibration, which is really positive in terms of hand-arm vibration or light finger issues. So in addition to the climate change benefits of not burning the petrol and the fumes and fuel that comes out of those, they're now getting the wider health benefits for our teams as well. The other aspect is just on the weed control. And one of the things mentioned in the report is that we primarily use glyphosate-based products as the weed control, which is a licensed product by the EU and the UK for use in that public spaces. The license for glyphosate-based herbicides in the UK comes to an end in December 2022. We're still waiting to see what's going to happen with that. But in the meantime, we are conscious that, we'd rather not use any chemicals if we can avoid that going forward. So we are going to be undertaking some trials in this current year into alternative methods of weed control. So that involves things such as hot water treatments. It involves thermal treatments, which are basically like little flamethrowers, which can be quite exciting if you've got the wrong footwear on. And also a mechanical removal of weeds, so basically just cleaning them out, and hopefully they'll take quite a long time to come back. So we're going to be trying some of those other alternative methods of weed control and see how that pans out, whilst there's still this uncertainty around the ongoing use of some of those herbicides going forward. I'm happy to take any questions. We've got both Greg and Steve Wardle here to assist any questions as well. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Paul. As thorough as ever. Any questions? Eileen Carty, then Rupert Gibson.
Mine's just a very quick one, Paul. Paul, I really push for the wildflowers to be planted around on the roadsides and things like that. And this year, obviously, the way things have been, it's been really difficult. Do you think we could try and increase that more for the future? And perhaps get wildflowers that reseed themselves, so there's less maintenance to keep overdoing them. Do you know what I mean? So they do it themselves. I mean, I'm not a gardener, so I really don't know which ones would self-seed and keep flowering, right? Because I think it's really important, because the sides of the roads and the spaces that we have just really brightens it up with the wildflowers. The second thing is, right, and I know I'm going back to like years and years and years ago, when people used to keep their own areas around their house clean, and they used to use hot water and they used to brush the path and swirl. Is there nothing, I know it's probably going backwards and not forwards, but is there not something where we could put together some kind of try and encourage people to try and keep their little area clean, if you know what I mean, outside of their house? Like years ago that they used to do that. I don't know, it's just me thinking of something totally different outside of the box. When I go out and I see weeds coming up in the cracks in the pavement outside of my house, I pull them out. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and I think I would like to respond to that one by saying we've never actually stop people from doing that. If
No, I know.
anything, we'd always want to encourage them to take ownership of the space outside their own properties and their own streets, effectively. To, you know, it's just good housekeeping. No one wants to live in somewhere that looks unloved and uncared for. Unfortunately, it's a societal thing that everyone expects somebody else to do these things.
That's right. Yeah.
But we're more than happy to continue pushing that volunteering, and just, you know, taking pride in your own local community is really, really important. On the roadside verges and the wildflower aspect, obviously in Blythe town in particular, we have the partnership with town council, and as part of that, we've adopted some different maintenance approaches, particularly on some of the main arterial routes into Blythe, where, you know, we've gone through that wildflower type approach. What I would say is that it's not a lower cost activity, that it's just a different maintenance and management regime. You still have to do a fair bit of work to support the wildflowers and to support that activity. Basically, you have to cut and remove a lot of the vegetation so you don't smother it, and you have to often reseed as well on that basis. So it's just a different management approach, but it's something that we do work with the local town and parish councils around just some of those options, because, as you rightly say, it really does lift people's spirits if they see a big swathe, and it does look really beautiful as a naturalised environment, and it's really good for pollinators as well. So it's something that we are keen on.
Jake, can I just come back on something?
As long as you're quick.
It is. Paul, is there any kind of wild plants that perhaps it can just reseed themselves? I know primroses and that kind of just expand themselves, and bluebells and that do that. Do you know what I mean? Could you look at a different variety that perhaps doesn't need as much maintenance?
There's lots of varieties that will self-seed themselves. The issue is it's just to get smothered with other vegetation.
Oh,
as
right,
well.
yeah, you said.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's the end of that biology lesson. So we've got Councillor Gibson and then Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, the weed control section's interesting. I knew nothing about glyphosate being withdrawn. So be it. But I would totally agree with you about the build up of dust, well, which is really blown soil, and general composting of all other things that land in these places. But it doesn't seem to be a council thing at the moment. That there's a lot of brush work going on. I could put miles in front of the brush at the moment, and nobody seems very interested in doing that. But I would also agree that it makes a huge difference, and it probably will be the way forward. Just go around with small brush, big brush, and you'll take an awful lot of weeds out, and especially the big ones doing it that way.
Chair, what I would say is we do, in terms of the mechanical sweep, and we put on effectively a different brush head that's got more wire in it, so it basically tears and shreds a lot of the vegetation. But clearly, you know, it's a big county, and it's a very resource intensive approach to tackle it on that basis.
Brian, it's you. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. Before I come in on my points, I just want to bring up on what Rupert's just said there. The different areas where these hardwire brushes will work in the urban and the rural will be totally different. And I think we've got to, maybe as a thought, that if we are going to tackle an area, you have to notify that area that the vehicles can't be at the road. And I'm just talking about probably Bedlington, Ashington, Blythe, Lymouth, those type of places. Now, if they know that a road shipper is going to go down, similar to, dare I say, the bin wagons, everybody seems to be courteous and make sure on a Thursday that their bin wagons got plenty of room to get down. So I think that's a conversation to have on the back of what Rupert's just said there. A couple of points I wanted to bring up was when lockdown first came down, you know, it caught everybody unawares. And what I've got to say is that from the frontline services around grass cutting and various other responsibilities that the Northumberland County Council have got, you know, you and your team did tremendously well. Early days, I know you weren't going to cut the grass on open spaces, but you know, a little bit of common sense, knew that that's where people needed to have the space. And I believe the towns that I've been around, and Ashington, mine, that, you know, those open spaces were well maintained and people could actually get out, because we're talking about the summer services here. And that was when people could get a walk out and keep it a safe distance. So it's got to be said, a well done to you and your team on that one. The other thing that I was going to mention on the weed spraying is obviously coming back to what I'd said previous. In Ashington and all the towns, the biggest problem is cars being parked and getting in to do the weed spraying. And we will go with the old plan, I'm assuming, that we're spraying the weeds, but we need to get the blue dye in so people know where they are and what's been happening. Now, in past tense, the blue dye has been going in, and the operatives have been doing it, but you just still can't see where they've been. And you know, I know it's something like a cake dye that you put in it, and it washes away, and it's not a problem. But we need to understand where weeds have been maintained. I'm very surprised my fellow councillor didn't bring this up, because she's always on me back. Eileen Carty, you mentioned around about the trees and the planting of trees. She always keeps telling me the right tree in the right place. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'm not sure that you're doing that, but sometimes it's just got to be said that, you know, our future councils will inherit our bad decisions. So, you know, I'm sure you'll have that in hand, but I just wanted to highlight that. And staying with the trees, we had a fatality, I believe it was last year in Durham, where a young girl was going to school and a tree branch broke away. And I was just wondering, are we still surveying around the schools as a priority? Because, you know, we're going into the summer again. Now is the time to trim them, any dangerous branches that may be a problem to school kids, especially Joe Public in itself. And I think that's probably all that I wanted to bring up, because I know other people will be, but I want to leave it with a thank you. And I can only go off the experience that I've worked with my local team through Ray Whelans and Peter Bowman. They've done fantastically well. And again, thank you very much to your staff. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think just picking up some of the comments and queries made, I think we did have I think a couple of weeks when the first lockdown was announced, where we did just take stock. And I think it was important that we did that in terms of how do we actually ensure staff safety, what are the priority services. And to be fair, it's the first pandemic we've all been through, so we weren't entirely sure how long it was going to last. But as soon as we started getting a feel for this is going to be a long term, you know, it's going to be here for some time, the decision was taken and the methods put in place to ensure that we could get out and do that grounds maintenance activity, because we were acutely conscious that we just couldn't let the county as a whole, quite frankly, go to the dogs whilst this was taking place. And it was really important that people had a good quality environment to go out and actually, you know, get some fresh air and help with the mental health during a very difficult time. And I think that's been proven to be the right decision. In terms of the dye, we do try and obviously coordinate and get vehicles off streets where we can, and that is always a challenge. Even for our refuse crews, it remains a challenge. I think this year I probably need to default to Greg or Stephen. I think we haven't been using the blue dye this year, but it's something that we can certainly look at again going forward. The issue around trees is a very apt one in terms of the very unfortunate and sad accident. I think it was actually in Newcastle where the young girl was sadly killed by a falling branch. We have undertaken a review with our corporate health and safety team and our estates team, because as a service area, we're not involved in schools, but the county council as a estates manager is involved in schools and has its own staff members that actually do those inspections of school properties to check on the trees, and where necessary bring in specialist support to do that. So I can give you that assurance that is ongoing and continues to be the case. And we've been looking at our own tree inspection arrangements just to, I think, refine and review those in relation to where we are responsible for maintaining trees in parks and places such as that, to make sure that that is robust, and again that we try and, as best as you can in these situations, avoid that risk to the public going forward.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I would just echo what Brian said about trees. You know, and I'm like, you know, the avenues, particularly those trees, are just monstrous. And I would take them all out today if you would let me, but you don't. So what can I do? So let's just make certain, though, as Brian said, that when we're planting trees, they're appropriate for the location that they're in. And then, you know, when we're all gone, at least, you know, in 50 years' time, there'll be nobody saying, oh, what a bunch of useless people, you know, decided to plant that there. And it's interesting about I guess it's a lot easier to have electric tools than petrol tools anyway, because, you know, you're not carrying anything around that's potentially lethal. But it's interesting for me to think about, you're talking about the you know, saving carbon, but the electricity is being generated somewhere and something's being burnt or heated up to provide the power. So you know, I'm not certain whether any of
the greening of the grid, Jeff.
Yeah,
Greening of the grid.
No, let's hope so. But then you see you're going to use flamethrowers now. I'd like to see how you're going to have an electric flamethrower. But
the flamethrowers are a bit more difficult because they are gas powered, and that's why we're not entirely convinced that that's the right way forward.
Yeah, well, but you know, I mean, we really are. You do get to the point with all this stuff where the end use might be decarboned, but how much was used and how much was the planet damaged making the thing in the first place? You know, digging up lithium, strip mining Australia, and you know, burning forests in Brazil to find lithium. Anyway, that's probably a discussion for another day. So here we are. Well done, I think is what the committee would say. As usual, you've managed it well. You've managed to contain your resources. You're all doing quite a good job. So thank you very much for that. I don't think there's anything else that anybody wants to ask about the summer grounds maintenance programme. If there is, I guess if something occurs to anyone, Paul's quite happy to take an email. Yeah.
I think Councillor Gallagher's waving his hands furiously.
Oh, go on then, Councillor Gallagher. Well done. You disappeared off here.
Yeah, you know, the reality is it's a good report. The one thing we haven't touched on is obviously the conversation around Cramlington Town Council withdrawing away from the partnership. I just want to emphasise that the partnerships are so important. They're good. They're a good tool to bring extra funding in, but they're also a good tool to enhance our towns. And I think, you know, to work very, very closely with the parishes and get closer with them and develop a plan where it can maybe introduce other towns and parishes into it would be fantastic. But you know, the one other question I was going to ask you was, what have you learned through COVID-19? But I think you've kind of answered that in your, you know, in your replies. So again, well done. Let's nurture the parishes, because once one's gone, you know, we don't want others to disappear either. We want to see the worth of the relationships. You know, that's happening through Europe at the minute. You know, UK's left Europe. You can guarantee other countries will be thinking about leaving as well. But let's show them the worth of the partnerships. So thank you very much.
Yeah, so thanks. But the weird thing was, I don't know why you put that in the report, to be honest with you, and why it's kind of to note that. I'm not certain that it's really any of our business, but perhaps I'm wrong. This is the Cramlington thing I'm talking about, the last recommendation G.
It was just to acknowledge that change, Chair, on the basis that we've obviously put a lot of work into foster and develop the partnership arrangements across the county to enhance grounds maintenance services and the visual amenity and the benefits in those areas.
And they've let you down, which is fair enough. Okay, so is that...
Yeah, Councillor Dunn.
I'm glad one of us is still awake, Brian. Councillor Dunn.
I just wanted to come back on what was said about the partnerships and just the flip side of it, really, that, you know, although you can encourage these partnerships, sometimes the smaller parishes and things, it's just not financially viable for them and they've got to find other ways around it. So to make them easier for smaller parishes would be absolutely great as well. Thank you.
Okay, excellent, thank you. I think we're now, my dog's even getting bored now. I think we're down to item G, when I think Sean is just going to talk to us about that. Anyone who needs, don't feel obliged to stay to the end if you're done. Thank you very much for your contribution. I look forward to seeing you next time. Right, Sean.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. We're nearly there. Just one meeting left on the 7th of April. It's Paul coming back to talk about the preparations for the next inspection. There are no items on the Cabinet's forward plan, so we'll not have any pre-scrutiny. So it's just a bit of a wind down at the moment.
Thank you. When you disappeared the first time and we're doing Appendix A, and I usually say Sean, and I said Sean, and no answer that came.
But I was gone.
I don't know whether you want to say anything about that, or are you done?
Well, no. I mean, just to confirm what I just said there, there's nothing on the actual Cabinet forward plan for anybody in April. Right. So as things stand, I think we're just getting Paul coming to explain the preparations for the next inspection. But also, just to note, over the last sort of 2 or 3 meetings, you have given a lot of work for me to do with regard to scrutiny, but it's all for the next committee rather than for yourselves. So
yeah. So
obviously we need to
you know, Sean. You know, why get us to do it when we can ask somebody else to do it is the strategy.
Yeah, it's all noted and ready to go for the next work programme, Chair.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, that's been quite long and mostly enjoyable. I thank you all for your attendance, and we shall say our goodbyes in April, which is what, the 4th, did you say?
7th.
7th. Okay, well, if I don't see you before then, enjoy yourselves, and I look forward to seeing you on the 7th. Take care now. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.